Hello and welcome to TRP News Update, the Rational Progressive. I'm James Andre and thank you for joining me. Today I want to talk a little bit about a liberal myth. I've been going on about this a little bit on the website and on Facebook, and this myth I want to talk about today is money in politics. So we take it for granted that money is corrupting politics, money has too much influence, Citizens United is a huge problem, and that the common person's voice is being overwhelmed by the flow of money into Congress. So one thing that two guys out of Princeton did a study, and a lot of people were talking about it, Gillens and Page did a study called Theories of American Politics. And in that study, which was widely cited to me and everywhere else, they said that the U.S. is indeed an oligarchy. So an oligarchy is a form of power structure where power effectively rests with a small number of people. So this is one of those things, this is one of these sort of factoids that people grasp onto and kind of blow out of proportion. So this is not really a revelation that the United States is an oligarchy because any major government in modern days, today in modern society, pretty much is an oligarchy. There's no way, if you look at it, even if Congress ran perfectly and everyone was completely happy, they had 100% approval rating, there's still only 536 members in Congress out of over 300 million people in the United States. So even if they were doing everything perfectly and exactly the way we wanted, we'd still be in an oligarchy. So, this is one of those things that we accept as fact, that there's truth to it, but the implication that we apply to it is not really quite what it actually is, or how it actually plays out in society. So one big thing I want to point out here is that Congress is like a weather vane. Politicians, this is a representational democracy. So politicians are representing their constituency. So they are listening to what people want and then acting accordingly. So Congress is like a weather vane, right? They blow whichever way the wind blows. And the problem is not that there's too much money in politics or too much money in Congress. The problem is money is the only thing blowing. So the American public is not blowing Congress in the direction they want them to go. So this is not about money overwhelming the people's voice. This is about the people not speaking. And I've said this before, when you have a 37% voter turnout in the midterms, that is a whisper. And a $200,000 campaign donation is a strong, loud voice. So folks, really it's not so much about money, it's about your participation in your government. So voter turnout is at record lows, and while the average citizen is being distracted about Citizens United and the Supreme Court and how could they, destroy our democracy like that, meanwhile, across the country, Republicans are taking away your right to vote and the right to vote of anyone who opposes them. So it doesn't matter how much money is in politics. If you don't have the right to vote, it's not going to matter ultimately in the end. So the real solution to Citizens United is not more litmus tests for the Supreme Court, but elected officials willing to make constitutional changes to limit improper influence, encourage civic participation, and protect the right to vote. We need a new voting rights amendment. We need to say unequivocally that Americans have the right to vote. That is actually not guaranteed as it stands right now. This is something that needs to be taken care of. Citizens United, yes, I'm not saying it's not important or not significant. What I'm saying is, on the scale of things, we don't even have a right to vote right now. So the question of how much money there is and how much influence that money is having is down the list, okay? So that same study that Gillens and Page study about the American politics, saying that the United States is an oligarchy, that same study, which people have glossed over, and this is an example of what I'm talking about. So many people cite that study to say, well, look, this is what money's doing to politics. That Gillens and Page says we're an oligarchy. Yes, that's what they said. But read the study, people. Read the study. They also say that ultimately, economic elites, the things they want out of government, happen to most of the time align with what the public wants. In other words, if a major corporation is typically trying to get the exact same things that the average citizen is trying to get. So not 100% aligned, but most of the time aligned. So even though they do have an outside influence as things stand right now, most of the time they're trying to obtain the same things. So big business, for example, was unanimous in not wanting a government shutdown. Republicans shut down the government anyway. Republicans also voted against the Export-Import Bank. They voted against job bills that would benefit business. So Republican opposition to progressive goals is not necessarily about them being bought or being influenced by money. They simply have ideological differences. And this is, and I've talked about this a little bit, as far as the Sanders campaign. There can't be a wave. These people just don't agree. They simply don't agree. There's a lot of moderates out there. There's a lot of conservatives out there. So yes, we have to push for progressive goals, but a large number of the country is resistant to change. So a wave is just not something that is built into our society and our political structure. So Republicans don't believe in government. They don't believe in taxes. And other than that, like every other politician, progressive, liberal, conservative, Republican, Tea Party, they vote to represent their constituents. They vote in the interests of the people who elected them. And if those people are conservative, then these politicians are going to vote conservative. If those people don't want any more taxes, then these politicians will not vote for more taxes. It's not going to happen. Why would they do that? To get themselves voted out of office? Think about it, people. It doesn't make any sense. So that's the same reason that Bernie Sanders voted against gun liability and voted for the F-35, $1.5 trillion boondoggle program that even the military doesn't want. He's representing his constituency. I'm not trying to smear the guy, but I am pointing out the inconsistencies here. He represents his people just like anyone else represents his people, their people. Hillary Clinton represented Wall Street. She's going to look out for their interests. They are one of the major economic engines in the state of New York. There's nothing wrong, nothing corrupt about that, people. That's why we elect officials, to represent their constituency. So there's too much money in politics, money's too powerful, money's corrupting the government talk sets up money as a defining and powerful factor about how government is run, is actually counterproductive to populism and destructive to the progressive movement. So what happens is when people realize they will never wield as much money and influence as someone like Sheldon Adelson or the Koch brothers or anyone in the 1%, they get cynical, they get discouraged, and they give up on politics. So we're setting up these boogeymen, we're setting up these insurmountable obstacles to people getting what they want out of society and saying, hey, this is too great, this is too powerful, the people's voices can't be heard. Well, then what's the point of people participating? It's counterproductive. It's actually, we're pointing out a problem, inflating it, and then it's actually working against our interests and working against our efforts. I just want to say, politics is not about beating someone else down. It's not about defeating another interest. It's not about trying to disrupt one interest or one agenda or another. What politics is about is trying to find a way to accommodate competing interests, to accommodate different perspectives, different views, different ideas about how society and government should operate, all while still respecting the basic tenets of our society. In our case, those basic tenets are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So all this other stuff, you know, is just window dressing, okay? As long as we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then, you know, we're sort of making adjustments around the edges. But there are some basic things, like I say, voting rights should be in the Constitution. You know, this is some basic stuff. This is basic framework stuff that we really need to be focused on, not the incidental stuff. You know, when people are spending $1 billion in a presidential campaign, we've sort of peaked. You know, people talk about peak oil. There's peak campaign money. There's a point where the influence cannot get any more. And I think we've reached that point. So, you know, worrying about Citizens United, yes, it's a concern. But ultimately, we've got some really big concerns about how, you know, our power grid, infrastructure investments, you know, these politicians, the Senate right now, if we have a historical, semi-historical energy policy bill going through the Senate right now. 8 years, in 8 years, it's the biggest update to U.S. energy policy, being disrupted right now because Republicans will not give money to aid Flint, Michigan, and their water problem. So, you know, but here's the problem. Now we're looking at a short-term solution. They want to throw something like $300 million at it, and there's like 3 different aspects to that. One's, you know, direct aid, one's a testing, and one is some sort of center to aid people who have been affected by lead and water. But the thing is, you know, that's one situation. We find out now, I think it's in Missouri, there's another city with even worse problems with lead in the water. So we need an infrastructure investment. We need a fund that will finance the redevelopment and repairs to water systems across the country, not just Flint, Michigan. So we're disrupting energy policy for admittedly tragic situation to address that one tragic situation. Meanwhile, out of Flint, Michigan, you know, less than 1% of the population of the United States, we're disrupting the entire U.S. energy policy. And not only that, we're not helping all the other people who have problems with their municipal water. So, you know, we got to look at the big picture, people. We've got to stop deifying and demonizing different politicians and different political offices. The president, the office of the president, is not the most important office. There are a lot of important offices. There's important offices in your locality, your city, your municipality, your county. There's you're talking about water in Flint, Michigan. There is someone who is elected official that oversees that in Flint, Michigan. There's somebody responsible right there that should have known what was going on, should have raised the alarm. You know, the mayor raised the alarm, but she's not directly responsible for the water. So we have to stop trying to look at one particular politician, one particular city, one particular political party, and expecting them to carry all the water. We've got to carry the water together. Sorry, I wasn't trying to make that kind of metaphor, but that's what came out. So, you know, we've got to work together. We've got to keep our eyes on the big picture, people. That's all I'm saying. People criticize me for, you know, oh, you're shilling for TPP. No, TPP is not the big deal people are making it out to be. You know, trade policy, I've said it 100 times in these videos, trade policy is not the problem. If there has been a problem with jobs or manufacturing in this country, it's not because of trade policy. Listen to me, people. It's not trade policy. It's domestic policy. We aren't making investments in infrastructure. We aren't encouraging the development and the redevelopment of industries to keep up with modern needs. It's a domestic policy. It's a lack of initiatives coming from our federal government. It has nothing to do with us trading 5% of the world's population, as Hillary Clinton said. We have to trade with other countries. We don't have a choice. So just, you know, let's keep our focus. Let's not get wrapped up in these liberal myths, and let's use the facts. Let's think about the big picture, and let's move forward with our progressive agenda. And that's all I have for today, folks. You know, we have a Tuesday, February 9th We have the votings for the New Hampshire primary, and in Georgia, where Clinton is absolutely crushing Bernie Sanders, early voting starts this Monday, February 8th, for the Super Tuesday contest on March 1st. So I'm James Andre. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.